and we are like the largest like coming voting bloc that's about to make a huge difference in the next 10-20 years.
Welcome, Mr. Mejia. It's amazing to have you here today for Pizza and Politics. As the title suggests, we usually have pizza to share during this interview, but unfortunately, due to the pandemic, this is a virtual installment of Pizza and Politics. And sadly, there is no pizza today, but we got a bit creative, and we have some form of pizza that we can share with one another.
Nice.
And I have a interesting, potentially deep dish pizza. Don't know what this one is, but it's something, right? Yeah, it's new.
Looks good.
And staying on the topic of pizza for a bit, we wanted to start off and ask, what topping, if any, do you think does not belong on pizza?
I'll go with the usual pineapple. My favorite's mushroom. I love them. Or vegetables. I love it.
I wanted to get us started with the first question, which is to really understand what a city controller is. Can you tell us more about their role and the significance of the job?
So the city controller is the chief accounting officer, the financial auditor, and also the paymaster. So to explain it more, the accounting officer is making sure that everything that the city does that involves money is booked correctly, is recorded correctly, is accounted for, right? Because if the money spends it on anything, then if we don't book it or record it, then we don't know where the money's going. So that's one of the big jobs as the accounting officer, is accounting for every financial transaction. We're also in charge of making sure that we don't go over budget. So if you have a budget, you want to make sure the city's not spending more because, well, we won't have enough money. Another big important role is the auditor. So making sure that our city departments are not wasting money, making sure that there's no fraud, that we're being efficient, and making sure that we're being effective, right? Because say we give a lot of money to a department and we find out that they're not really being successful at their job, then we can do an audit and put reports out, and hopefully they'll make corrections, or maybe they might even not need the department anymore. And then the paymaster is just the person in charge of paying everybody, whether that's employees or city vendors. And so that is the city controller.
So when did you first get involved in politics, and did you ever think that you would work in public service?
I got involved like late 2015, and once Bernie started running, I was very inspired by someone who inspired the youth. Bernie inspired me back then to get involved in the political process beyond voting. And so I never thought that I would be running for office, to be honest. But I realized that the people in power right now are not doing the jobs that they should. And they have a lot of power and control over the conditions and that we live in, right? And so I felt that if they're not going to do it, and if no one's challenging them, why not, right? So that.
Thank you for that. I think that's really insightful. But in the past, you run for Congress in the 34th district. Can you tell us about what inspired you to get into the field of public service, and how that experience has impacted you and your future political aspirations?
Right. I mean, besides Bernie getting involved directly in politics, I would say just growing up, I was always passionate about helping our unhoused community living on the streets. So I did outreach doing that. I'm part of the LA Tenants Union, where we help out tenants who are getting huge rent increases, or are getting evicted, or they're getting forced out of their homes because they're getting tricked into selling their, getting out of their units. And so I always had a passion for helping people when it comes to housing issues. And, I thought that back then when I ran, I ran on issues of like universal rent control, so that, you know, landlords can't just raise your rent by like 1,000%. Building quality public housing to make housing a human right. And so from that base of activism around housing issues is sort of pushed me even more to get involved in organizations and running on those platforms of housing. And, you know, besides just housing, you know, I'm a huge supporter of Medicare for all, canceling student debt, making sure that everybody can become a citizen, you know, 100% clean renewable energy, because I am a green. And yeah, that's what really compelled me to want to do more.
Wow, thank you. So in our country, there's a lot of political division, and many think that there are only two options, Democrat or Republican. Can you speak to us a bit about why you chose to break this boundary and run as a Green Party candidate?
Yeah, so back then, I was a Democrat my entire voting life, and once I saw someone really explain like what's happening behind the scenes, like Bernie did, because many of us, especially when you grow up in a liberal like city like Los Angeles or California, it's really like plastered in your face that, you know, Democrat is good and Republican's bad, and there's just this whole polarization of politics. And I just thought, well, it can't be this bad, right? There has to be more options. and that's sort of when I started looking into other parties, and I realized that there were third parties that are actually pretty big, you know, not as big as the main two parties, but I found the Green Party because they represent exactly everything that I want, and I feel that will help this country fundamentally, right? You have to sort of get down to like the root causes of what drives the sort of like woes in society. And so I thought that the Green Party had an amazing platform. Like it was like Bernie Sanders, but on steroids. And I decided, like, why not run under a third party? And we really like made huge waves. When we ran in 2018, we set the record for the highest vote percentage as a Green running for U.S. Congress against a Democrat. So, you know, that's the main reason I ran as a Green. I feel like we need more options, and more options equals more democracy and more voices being heard. And so that's why I'm a Green.
So you've kind of covered this before a little bit, but this seems to be one of the more prevalent issues that you're covering in your campaign. So why do you think that transparency when it comes to public spending is important?
Transparency is very important, because if you don't know where the money's coming from or how you're spending it, then you can't really pinpoint. I mean, you can, but having these numbers in front of you can really show why some neighborhoods and communities are neglected, or why certain city departments have, you know, the best resources or the best equipment, right? Like, for example, if, you know, our housing department only gets a little bit above 150 million a year, and LA is huge, you know, it's like 4 million people, and we only put 150 million. And if anyone has ever been to LA, housing is a huge issue here, and we need more housing. And a lot of people who live in some of the rent controlled units are getting like kicked out, and the housing department might not be helping them as much. So, you know, you see that housing is sort of like deteriorating. There's not a lot of services. And then you look at like, oh, here's the LAPD, they get $3 billion, and they have the best equipment. They have like the best trucks, the best like helicopters, everything. And so you sort of, when you see these numbers, it gives you some perspective on like, okay, that makes sense why this department is failing or not doing a good job. Or like, you know, like transportation, we only get 300 million. And our transportation is not the best, right? Our streets are not that great. The bus and rail needs a lot of work and whatnot. So, I mean, transparency is huge, and it really connects the dots on why things aren't improving as much, because everything the city does has a financial impact. And when people know that, then they're they are better armed to lobby their city council members, like when they go to meetings or talking to them. So.
Our organization focuses a lot on youth engagement and involvement. How do you actively try to involve youth in your campaigns? And why do you think having young people involved in politics is important?
How do we get youth involved? We have people in high school helping us. It's really amazing. Maybe it's because I look young, even though I'm not. But we have a lot of young people from high school to college on our team helping out, and I think it's because we make our campaigns educational, but also fun. I mean, I think that's really important. Is what differentiates us between your typical like $1 million campaign is that, you know, we're all not wearing like suits and talking about, you know, how much we're going to spend millions of dollars and trying to get all these donations from corporations and lobbyists, but we're more so focusing and grounding ourselves on like people power. And I think these are the times for that, you know, from 2016 to 2020. I think the environment now is to get more people involved in the political process. And that's what we're doing. And we're making it fun and educational, because not a lot of people know about finances, right? Like who cares about accounting? Like it's boring, but for some reason we made it fun or funny, like with our TikTok videos or Instagram. You know, we found a way to educate people, and empower people through our campaign. And I think that's why it's really important to have campaigns like.
Thank you for that. And we really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk to us today. So going off of what you just said, why do you think that students should take their time out of their day, their busy schedules, to learn about the government?
I think it's important for students to take time to learn about government, because what the government does will affect their future. Now, whether it's like environmental issues like climate change, or whether they graduate from high school and they have to go to college and they might end up a lot of money in debt, I think it's really important to realize that the youth have the power.